Good evening, you're watching India First. I'm Gaurav Sawant. Big story coming in on India today. The European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen in Davos has just said that the European Union is close to sealing a landmark free trade agreement with India. She's described the proposed agreement as one of the most ambitious deals ever attempted by the European Union. So Ursula von der Leyen was speaking at the World Economic Forum. She said some work remains, but the deal could create a market of nearly 2 billion people, account for almost a quarter of global GDP. She confirmed she will travel to India immediately after Davos. So von der Leyen and European Council President Antonio Costa will visit India, the chief guest at the Republic Day celebrations on the 26th of January. And Ursula von der Leyen will also co-chair the India-EU summit with Prime Minister Narendra Modi on the 27th. The India-EU trade deal is being described as the mother of all deals. The EU market accounts for about 17% of India's total exports. In fact, in 2024-25, India's bilateral trade in goods terms with the EU amounted to about $136.5 billion. Exports stood at $75.8 billion and imports at about $60 billion, making the EU India's largest goods trading partner. The agreement will be India's largest trade pact, covering about 27 developed European Union nations, including France, Germany, Spain, Italy. And since 2014, the government has finalized 7 trade pacts, including with Australia, the United Kingdom, Oman, New Zealand, the UAE, and the FTA bloc, and Mauritius. Commerce and Industry Minister Piyush Goyal, he described the proposed India-EU free trade agreement as the mother of all deals. The negotiations are in their final stages, with the announcement of the agreement's conclusion expected on the 27th of January. That is to coincide with the state visit of the EU leadership in India. Now, before I get you more on this big development, let's listen in to European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen.
Right after Davos, the next weekend, I will travel to India. There's still work to do, but we are on the cusp of a historic trade agreement. Indeed, some call it the mother of all deals. Right after Davos, the next weekend, I will travel to India. There's still work to do, but we are on the cusp of a historic trade agreement. Indeed, some call it the mother of all deals.
So let's try and make sense of this huge development. Pranay Upadhyay, my colleague, joins me on the show. Also with me is India Today's Foreign Affairs editor Geeta Mohan and Ambassador Ashok Sajjanhar. Geeta, what's expected from Ursula von der Leyen's India visit? Do we finally see the deal inked on the 27th and operationalization, or do we see an agreement or a statement by the heads of state and government?
Well, Gaurav, it is going to be significant because it's going to be a leadership announcement of the conclusion of the deal, after which there will be a legal scrubbing that will take place of the deal between India and the European Union, following which the deal in all probability will be signed between Safowicz and Piyush Goyal. So that's the process that will take place. But what is significant over here is one deal that was being negotiated for quite a while now will actually be announced as having been concluded. So that's what is going to happen on the 27th after the summit level meeting between European Union leadership and Prime Minister Modi.
Pranay, do we look at this as an opportunity in an adversity both for India and for the European Union, given Trump tariffs on India already and the threats to impose additional tariffs on EU countries now over Greenland?
Absolutely, Gaurav. Timing is very key here. because the Europe is facing a lot of difficulties in terms of the market access, in terms of the tariffs, in terms of the geopolitical tensions as well. And they also want to explore, in fact, they have been talking about China plus one in terms of the logistics supply, in terms of the market access. Their over-dependence on China has also made European Union to restart these negotiations in 2022. We have seen that, this is one of the most, longest drawn trade negotiation, in fact, the most complex one. And we have seen that how European Union and India has worked out this complex deal, and this is almost near to conclusion, and we are in all likelihood during 26th January and 27th of January meeting, it is likely to be concluded. And the volume what we are looking at is like around $22 trillion economy of Europe. So Indian goods will get a greater access in the European market. Likewise, the tariffs for the Indian products will come as down as 3.8%, or in terms of the textile, like around 10%. So this will be a greater access for Indian markets.
So
and
great diversification in a very difficult situation. Ambassador Sajjanhar, Union Minister Piyush Goyal in the past had described this as a super deal. With tensions rising with the United States, European Union, does it now have added incentive to finally, travel that last mile? In the past, again, Piyush Goyal had many times in the past said, so near and yet so far.
Yes, thank you very much, Gaurav, for having me. You're very right. We've been negotiating on this deal for the last, 22 years, or about 20 years. 2007, we started. I remember I was in Brussels at that time, and we had started from Helsinki. And at that time, we had committed that we'll finish it in 2 years. It didn't take 2 years. It's taken all this time. But I think we are very close. We are, as the EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, she said we are at the cusp. And both sides have been working very hard, and the leadership is there. So, it'll be the mother of all deals, as she also mentioned. And the proponent of the art of the deal will be missing from there. So I think that will be a very good signaling, a good messaging that will go there. The last point on this, if you permit, Gaurav, I'll say, you mentioned that India has signed about 7-8 deals since 2014. All of them are doing well. You look at the United Arab Emirates, how our trade and particularly our exports have increased. You look at Australia, how well they have done. Unfortunately, the trade deals that were signed before that, with ASEAN, with Japan, with Korea, they didn't do too well. But right now, I think our negotiations have been extremely good, and I'm very hopeful that the trade agreement with the European Union will also be
So I want to quickly bring in Geeta once again, Ambassador. Geeta, the FTA couldn't have come at a better time. There's global trade disruptions, high tariffs imposed by the United States on India, threat on the European Union. Indian exporters have been facing, this 50% tariff. So this agreement with the EU will give us another market, greater diversity for our shipment, and of course, reduce dependence on China, Geeta.
Well, absolutely. And also reduce dependence on America and the American markets where our exporters are feeling the pinch and brunt of the tariffs, Gaurav. Having said that, one more thing that is an additional advantage in this EU-India deal is the respect and dignity. There are red lines that India had spelled out, and those red lines, in all probability, will be honored. Sources who were speaking to us on background very clearly said, one is that the leadership is going to announce the deal, and secondly, the red lines are being maintained, such as dairy, absolutely a red line for India, being maintained in this free trade agreement. And that certainly is a plus. Certain areas in agriculture, again, being respected and maintained. And similarly, there are certain issues that Europe has when it comes to carbon footprint, so on and so forth. India is looking at recalibrating their companies to ensure that there's some sort of carbon reading for products that reach European markets. So both sides are respectful and mindful of each other's markets, and that certainly is a plus, unlike the conversations and negotiations that we're seeing between India and the United States of America, where that dignity and respect is not being accorded to the sensitivities that India attaches to dairy products.
And respect. Very strong words that you've used. And before I move on in this broadcast to talk about that lack of dignity and respect in US and transatlantic relations with Europe in just a moment, I once again want you to listen in to Ursula von der Leyen on looking forward to her visit to India. Listen in to why this could well be the mother of all deals.
Right after Davos, the next weekend, I will travel to India. There's still work to do, but we are on the cusp of a historic trade agreement. Indeed, some call it the mother of all deals. Right after Davos, the next weekend, I will travel to India. There's still work to do, but we are on the cusp of a historic trade agreement. Indeed, some call it the mother of all deals.
Now let's shift focus to our top story: lack of dignity and respect in the transatlantic relationship. US President Donald Trump has made it clear there will be no going back on his plans to take control of Greenland. In fact, he posted a map. Watch that on your television screen. A map. It's an AI map that shows both Greenland and Canada as part of the US because they've been shown in the colors of the US flag. There is an intense pushback from European leaders, at least as of now, and this controversy has pitched NATO versus NATO. Donald Trump says he's agreed to a meeting of various parties at Davos in Switzerland, but insists Greenland is imperative for US national security and for global security, and that there is no going back on taking control of Greenland. We'll get you more on the biggest transatlantic face-off over Greenland. But first, this report.
No, I don't care about the Nobel Prize. We stopped 8 wars, and maybe we'll be stopping a 9th very soon. We'll see.
With that familiar grievance, Donald Trump escalates his boldest claim yet: complete and total control over Greenland. And then comes the post. US President Donald Trump shares an AI-generated map of the United States that includes Greenland, Canada, and even Venezuela, all shown as part of US territory. A provocation that has allies rattled and redraws borders with just a click.
We need Greenland for national security. And if you take a look at Greenland, you look up and down the coast, you have Russian and Chinese ships all over the place.
Europe has hit back and hard. EU Commission chief calls for a new independent Europe, an upgraded Arctic strategy, and full solidarity with Denmark and Greenland.
Full solidarity with Greenland and the Kingdom of Denmark. The sovereignty and integrity of that territory is non-negotiable. Europe is preparing its own security strategy, which we plan to publish later this year. And as part of this, we are upgrading our Arctic strategy too.
Russia has also weighed in.
Мы не имеем отношения к этому вопросу.
In principle, Greenland is not a natural part of Denmark, is it? It was neither a natural part of Norway nor a natural part of Denmark. It's a colonial conquest. The fact that the inhabitants are now accustomed to it and feel comfortable is another matter. But the problem of former colonial possessions is getting more and more serious.
Развязки этой проблемы.
And ahead of his Davos visit, US President Trump has turned diplomacy into a spectacle, publicly sharing private messages with heads of state. Donald Trump posts a message from NATO's Secretary General Mark Rutte, praising his actions and saying he's committed to finding a way forward on Greenland. Trump also shared a private message from French President Emmanuel Macron, in which the French president says he does not understand Trump's position on Greenland and seeks further dialogue. This, even as the US president threatens tariff war against France and Macron for refusing to join Trump's Gaza Board of Peace.
Do you have any response to President Macron saying he will not join the border peace?
Oh, did he say that? Well,
Yeah.
nobody wants him because he's going to be out of office very soon. So, that's all right. What I'll do is if they feel like Costo, I'll put a 200% tariff on his wines and champagnes, and he'll join. But he doesn't have to join. If he said that, you're probably giving it to me a little bit differently. But if he actually did say that, but as you know, he's going to be out of office in a few months.
Denmark is standing tall. It has deployed soldiers. Its army chief lands in Greenland. The message: Greenland is not for sale. From AI maps to tariff threats, from private DMs to public ultimatums, the war for Greenland is no longer whispered in back rooms. It's loud and it's public and it's heading straight to Davos. Bureau Report, India Today. So US President Donald Trump insists US has to take control of Greenland to keep Russia and China at bay. But is that really true? Because Sergei Lavrov, Russian foreign minister, again at Davos today, he made it very clear Russia has no plans whatsoever on Greenland. Listen in.
When the situation around Greenland is being justified by the fact Russia or China will capture it, there are no confirmations of it. Even Western economists and political scientists are debunking it. Trump said that Greenland is important for the security of the US. Crimea is equally important for the security of Russia. In principle, Greenland is not a natural part of Denmark, is it? It was neither a natural part of Norway nor a natural part of Denmark. It is a colonial conquest. The fact that the inhabitants are now accustomed to it and feel comfortable is another matter. But the problem of former colonial possessions is getting more and more serious.
So that was the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov in Russia. Now, both Greenland and Denmark have repeatedly said that the Arctic island is not for sale. Greenland's Prime Minister made it clear if they have to choose, if they ever have to choose between the United States and Denmark, they will choose Denmark. And yet President Trump remains adamant, even though Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov have said neither Russia nor China plan to annex Greenland. President Trump has refused to rule out the use of force. Will Davos pave the way for dialogue, diplomacy, or the use of force? Joining me on India First is Nella Jaksic. She's a geopolitical correspondent, joins us from Europe. Professor Andrew Latham is a distinguished scholar of international security and strategic studies, joins us from the United States. And Ambassador Ashok Sajjanhar stays with me on this broadcast. Nella Jaksic, can Europe realistically ward off the Trump threat? Or ultimately, if he chooses to use force, Europe will have to fall in line? Are there any expectations from this Davos meeting?
Briefly, before I touch on your questions, I just want to kind of state the situation the world is in today. I think we are watching a geopolitical theater, most definitely, where international law has become a simple formality. Every territory, it seems like it's open for grabs, especially when it comes to the question of sovereignty. And I want to kind of underline that not only international law has become a formality, it actually has become a piece of paper that nobody is abiding according to, although it exists. In respect to your question, I believe I kind of want to forecast about Donald Trump's and his administration's strategy, what could be in the future. I think Davos is just going to be a platform where he kind of reiterates his hardline stance that the United States has a major interest in Greenland. They're not going to back off until full ownership or full access of Greenland is transferred to the United States. Although we know that Denmark and the PM of Greenland have already said those are the red lines. So what's going to happen next? I believe diplomatic conversations are going to continue, especially some high-level working groups. But ultimately, Donald Trump is going to control the narrative. He's going to control the political leverage, and especially the escalation to the point where I believe Trump's administration is trying to avoid a military operation in Greenland. I don't think it's the same case scenario as in Venezuela, because here we have Europe and NATO involved. And I firmly believe that Trump's administration does not want to have a direct confrontation with NATO. So I think he's going to use his political economic leverage, especially his pressure with the tariffs upon Europe, Greenland, and Denmark. And what he's going to try to accomplish is a slow transition where the US does not openly attack Greenland, but kind of like with economic, political leverage, pressuring, and the keep going of diplomatic conversations, he's going to put Denmark and Greenland in a very, very difficult position, in a difficult spot where they're kind of like nudged to kind of change their position.
Okay, so let me bring in Professor Latham, because is this my way or the highway as far as Donald Trump is concerned? And should he pursue taking over Greenland by force, as he says he hasn't ruled that out? Would that mean the end of NATO? Because it's one NATO country not attacking Russia, but another NATO country for territory.
Well, a number of questions there that are all important. First of all, it wouldn't be unprecedented. Greece and Turkey have had their issues around Cyprus, for example. So, but it's the United States is qualitatively different as a player within NATO than either Greece or Turkey. So there's that. Another point that is raised quickly is that Ursula von der Leyen is wonderful when she stays in her lane. Look at the trade relations that she's negotiating with India. But she seems not to understand that Greenland withdrew from the European Union in 1985. And so this really is not her wheelhouse. And it's also a security issue. The precursor for the European Union originally was the European Coal and Steel Community and then the European Economic Community. It's not a security community. People should stay in their lanes. But the most important point I'd like to make is that this is classic good cop, bad cop negotiating. Trump is very good at playing the bad cop. He posts things, he says things about tariffs. But the people around him, Scott Bessent and Marco Rubio and people like that, are saying, you know, what's really important here is securing Greenland, because it is important to North American and North Atlantic security. The Danes, the European members of NATO, have not done enough. They need to do more. This is an old American refrain, burden sharing. It goes back to the founding of NATO. And so pressuring, and not the one British soldier and 5 French soldiers and 3 German janitors or whatever they sent. That's not going to do it. It has to be a serious permanent rotation that's going to meaningfully enhance the security of Greenland and therefore North America, the North Atlantic. And of course, the United States under treaty rights has the right to increase its footprint on the island as much as it wants. It used to have 14 bases on the island at the height of the Cold War. It scaled it back to 1 right now, Patufic, but it could scale it up again. That's the law of the land.
Sure, but you know, scaling up would mean securing Greenland, but not controlling it, not controlling territory, not owning real estate. But Nella Jaksek, Professor Latham has a very valid point. Before I bring in Ambassador Sajjanhar, you cannot secure Greenland by sending in 1 military observer from the United Kingdom, 13 from France, 14 from Germany, 1 from Norway, 2 from Finland, if I have the number right. I mean, that would add up to 1 platoon strength, 35 soldiers. I mean, that's symbolic, right? But what is it all about? Does Europe pretend it is serious, but it knows it can't stand up to the US?
I actually believe that Europe is kind of giving psychological support to Greenland, because ultimately it's going to come to the what moves we should watch for next is the United States not doing open confrontations so much, but movements of transport aircrafts, naval assets, engineering units, or command and control infrastructure to the existing base of US and Greenland. I think this question is more important to watch of what's going to happen next than to see like the troops of Europe. Yes, I see that they're coming to Greenland to kind of secure, to kind of bring a political stance, but I think this is mostly psychological and political support rather than kind of ramping up for a big military operation against the US.
Okay, Ambassador Sajjanhar, is there any justification for President Trump to take over Greenland as a NATO member? If there's a threat from Russia or China, he can deploy any number of troops and missiles and warships and submarines in the region, as was done at the height of Cold War, have a dozen plus bases. There were 14 in the past, but he wants the real estate. Look at that the AI map that's been circulated on Truth Social.
No, you're absolutely right. In my view, there is no justification whatsoever, because according to international law, it is an autonomous territory and it's a part of the Kingdom of Denmark. And I think it's also been mentioned that earlier in the past, the United States used to have more than 10,000 troops on the island. Nothing stops it from having that many or even more. I think what the Europeans have said very categorically, that its sovereignty is off the table. It is non-negotiable. Anything else and everything else can be discussed. And that is what, in fact, if you permit, I'll just make two points here. That, when we had the foreign minister of the Kingdom of Denmark and foreign minister of Greenland, they had a conversation with J.D. Vance and Marco Rubio in the White House a couple of days ago. And they said, okay, both of us reiterated our position. There are red lines that we have mentioned, and we have agreed to set up a working group, and we will continue our discussions. But lo and behold, on the same day or just the day after, Mr. Trump comes up with these 10% tariffs. I think from Europe, they would have thought that, okay, we have had discussions with the Vice President of the United States. Now, obviously, what the Vice President agrees to with the Europeans, that doesn't hold any value whatsoever. Because here, what it really brings up is that you don't know with whom you have to speak as far as the United States is concerned. Second point, Gaurav, second point, both the foreign minister of Denmark and Greenland, they said, we have not seen a Chinese ship or a Russian ship in the vicinity for the last 10 years. So I think all this argument about Russian and Chinese ships sort of, hovering around Greenland, that seems to be very, very inaccurate, to put it very mildly. They also said that we have stopped the investments coming in from China. So I think this is basically like it was in Venezuela. It was for oil. Here it is for the real estate and for the critical minerals, gas,
it's for the
oil.
real estate, critical minerals is what you say. President Trump also indicated that psychologically, it's very important for him to take control of Greenland. But Professor Latham, European Union, by and large, so far has given in to Trump since they depend on the US for security. But can a united EU stand up to Trump in your view? Can they use the trade bazooka as they talk about counter tariffs, or ultimately, in the American view, EU will fall in, or Europe will fall in line?
Well, there's no such thing as a solid front in the European Union. The Germans are already waffling around this. They don't want a confrontation with the United States. Certain countries in the East, Hungary, for example, they have no time for this kind of talk. Now, it's true that President Trump's rhetoric sometimes alienates the right of center base of some of these political leaders, whether it's in Britain or in the European Union. But the European Union is divided on this, not on ceding sovereignty, but on Trump and on the security importance of Greenland. And it's true that, by the way, that there are no Chinese naval vessels, but as the polar ice cap recedes, the Northwest Passage and the North Sea route, and indeed the entire North Atlantic/Arctic Ocean, these are becoming battlegrounds. The Chinese are developing the naval capabilities to operate under the ice and in the Arctic. They've declared themselves a near-Arctic nation. They've tried to purchase some of those old U.S. Air Force and Army bases. There's no doubt that in a gray zone kind of way, a hybrid threat kind of way, Russia and China are ramping up their ability to compete in the Arctic, which includes Greenland and Canada, and that the United States is it's waking up, it's beginning to react. Sometimes quite wisely in terms of the Arctic over-the-horizon radar on Canada, sometimes in a ham-fisted way. That's Trump's modus operandi.
Let me get Nela Jaksik to respond to that, and I want to show that map on the Arctic route that will open up once that polar ice melts. But Nela Jaksik, merit in the Americans saying the Chinese are lurking around, if not today, a decade from now. The way they're building up their navy, the way Russia is gaining ground in those Arctic waters. And this is a very important territory that links the North Atlantic Ocean and the Arctic Ocean. Europe not in a position to defend it. America can do it better.
I think when it comes to the question of America's national security, at this moment, I don't see like a realistic threat to it. However, I more think this is a political interest of the United States. However, the question of national self-determination of the people of Greenland is kind of backfired because the US has completely neglected this. It just seems like that this territory is very attractive at the moment for America's US political interest, and it's open now for negotiation after US's Venezuela military operation. I do think the US is kind of using its momentum, especially after Venezuela, to kind of bring up this question. What will happen in the next 10 years is very open to interpretation. Donald Trump and his administration is currently interested in Greenland. However, there are a lot of international laws to be broken. However, in the question of national sovereignty, Denmark and Greenland are not going to budge so easily, I think.
But do international laws, like you yourself pointed out, do they even exist? The manner in which the Americans went into Venezuela, and not just now, look at what happened in Iraq, look at what's happened in Libya, look at what's happened across the world, the manner in which both the US and the Europe have behaved either in Africa or in Latin American countries or in West Asia. But Ambassador Sajjanhar, it's not just Greenland, it's also Canada that the AI map, it also shows Canada as part of United States in the same colors. What does that indicate, and can this transatlantic alliance survive if the US is no longer seen as a reliable partner? Canada always, already, is it charting out an independent course, especially with Mark Carney's interactions with the Chinese leadership?
Yeah, as far as it's not only Canada, let me put it this way, the whole world is charting a different course. Different course, those which had strong partnership, transatlantic partnership we've been talking about. Canada, you said, Mexico also, they've had this trade agreement. I think the whole world has come to realize that Mr. Trump flexes muscles. He cannot be trusted. He is a very uncertain partner. So all the countries are looking for diversification. And it's not only these countries. When we are talking about, let's say, the Arctic, as far as security of the Arctic is concerned, Gaurav, there are other countries also in the Arctic. The map that you had shown, Iceland also is a part of the Arctic where, all these actions are taking place in terms of coming from the Pacific right into the Atlantic through the Arctic when the polar ice melts. There is also Norway. It has a huge part of the Arctic. There is also Canada, which has a huge, it's not only Greenland, that Greenland is the one that is going to be impacted. But if you have to protect it, if you have to protect Greenland, I'm sure as Europe is concerned, they are very willing to cooperate and collaborate. That's the whole idea of, in my view, of the transatlantic partnership. It's as far as NATO is concerned, they work together whenever there is any threat. So why is it that you need to put Europe to one side? And
so let me take that question to Professor Latham, because President Trump's threat of 10% to 25% tariff against NATO allies over Greenland is being described in Europe as unprecedented. Will it work? Are there any voices in the US telling him that this move could be counterproductive? Why can't they work together on Greenland, sir?
One of the reasons why this has popped as an issue now is because President Trump is on the verge of losing his tariff powers. The Supreme Court is going to strike down his claims that he has that authority under various bits of legislation. So he's going to lose that. He's going to lose the House and the Senate maybe in November, the House for sure, maybe the Senate too in November. So he's not going to be able to do what he wants to do. But even now, if we concede that international law is more about norms than rules, American domestic law is very much about rules, and the president cannot annex anything, not even his own backyard. He can't.
Yep. Absolutely.
Because it requires an act of Congress, and there's no appetite in this Congress, and there'll be no appetite in the next Congress. And so when President Trump leaves office in 3 years, the windows are all closing for him.
Okay, so 9 months to go for that, November midterms. We'll be watching that very closely. Nella Jaksic, Professor Latham and Ambassador Sajjanhar for joining me here on India Today. Many thanks. I have breaking news that's coming in from Davos. I quickly want to cut across and bring in this latest piece of input that's coming in. Several top Indian business leaders are all set to meet US President Donald Trump on the sidelines of the World Economic Forum at Davos, and this interaction is expected to bring together a select group of top global CEOs to discuss policy priorities and economic direction, signaling India's growing influence in global business discussions. So a very high-powered Indian delegation is expected to interact with President Trump, and this includes the chairman of Tata Sons, Natarajan Chandrasekaran, Bharti Enterprises chairman Sunil Bharti Mittal, Wipro CEO Srini Palia, Infosys CEO Salil Parekh, Mahindra Group CEO Anish Shah Bajaj. We are also told FinServ chairman Sanjeev Bajaj. There are others who would be meeting President Trump, and this meeting comes as trade negotiations remain in limbo. Tariff tensions are clouding global markets. They're putting India's role as a stable economic partner into sharper focus. So all eyes will also be on Trump's keynote address at Davos on Wednesday. I quickly want to cut across to Geeta Mohan for more on this. Geeta, what do we expect from this Trump meeting with Indian CEOs? What's that big message that's expected?
Well, the big message would be from both sides. The US president wants to engage all businesses. He's there in Davos to do just that. His address will be critical, where he's going to talk about why and the reasons behind these tariffs and weaponizing of tariffs. But the Indian CEOs clearly are going to talk about how tariffs in the long run are adversarial to India-US ties, and how they need to work together and find a path towards a working relationship. These are big companies that have huge stakes and huge money invested in the United States of America, and so Trump needs these CEOs and these businesses to stay engaged and stay invested in the United States of America. I suppose the conversations would be on that front, but this is also a way of saying for the Indian side of saying that both countries need to work out a way, Gaurav, so that they can tide over the problems that the two countries have faced because of the tariffs and move forward in a way that does not completely rattle not just the Indian markets but global markets as well.
Keep tracking that story. I will come back to you for more. There's a generational shift in the Bharatiya Janata Party. The new BJP president is all of 45 years old, and Nitin Nabin formally took charge as the youngest ever president of the Bharatiya Janata Party. The ceremony at the Bharatiya Janata Party headquarters was attended by Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the top party leadership, and this marks a clear change of guard. The Prime Minister called Nabin his boss. In fact, as he was ushered into the BJP president's office, it was the Prime Minister who pulled back the chair, made him sit down. There were, of course, temple visits and a rousing reception at the BJP headquarters that marked the beginning of the Nabin era in the BJP. But beyond the symbolism, the stakes for Nitin Nabin are extremely high. The BJP is looking ahead to very crucial assembly elections in states like Bengal, in Assam, in Kerala, in Tamil Nadu. All eyes on the party's next generation leadership. The youthful face, can it deliver on ground? we get you this report.
मैं कार्यकर्ता हूं, वे मेरे बॉस हैं।
Change of guard in the BJP. 45-year-old Nitin Nabin took charge as BJP president at the party headquarters in Delhi on Tuesday, making him the youngest party chief so far. The ceremony was attended by Prime Minister Narendra Modi and senior leaders. The former Bihar minister, before taking charge, offered prayers at the Jhandewala Temple, Valmiki Temple, Hanuman Temple, and Bangla Sahib Gurdwara. He then reached the BJP headquarters where he received a rousing welcome. Soon, Prime Minister Modi also joined him. The Prime Minister and other top leaders felicitated their new party president. The outgoing chief, JP Nadda, showered praise on his successor.
हम सब जानते हैं कि नितिन जी जो मूलतः कार्यकर्ता हैं, वैचारिक पृष्ठभूमि पर परिपक्व हैं और बहुत ही छोटी उम्र में 5 बार विधायक रह चुके हैं और वर्तमान में भी विधायक हैं। बिहार सरकार में कई बार मंत्री रहे हैं। आप छत्तीसगढ़ के भी प्रभारी रहे, जहां आपने सरकार को लाने में बहुत बड़ा योगदान किया।
The biggest praise came from Prime Minister Modi, who called Nabin his boss.
और जब बात पार्टी के विषयों को आती है, तब माननीय नितिन नबीन जी, मैं कार्यकर्ता हूं, वे मेरे बॉस हैं।
The Prime Minister also hailed BJP.
बीजेपी एक ऐसी परंपरा है जो पद से नहीं, प्रक्रिया से चलती है। हमारे यहां पदभार एक व्यवस्था है और कार्यभार ये जीवन भर की जिम्मेदारी है। हमारे यहां अध्यक्ष बदलते हैं, लेकिन आदर्श नहीं बदलते। नेतृत्व बदलता है, लेकिन दिशा नहीं बदलती।
An overwhelmed Nabin thanked the Prime Minister for reposing faith in him. He declared the BJP will perform well in the upcoming assembly polls.
अगले कुछ महीने में तमिलनाडु, असम, बंगाल, केरल और पुडुचेरी में चुनाव होने जा रहा है और वहां की डेमोग्राफी की पूरी चर्चा हो रही है। किस प्रकार से बदले हुए डेमोग्राफी में वहां चीजें बदल रही हैं और हमारे लिए अपने आप में एक चुनौती है, लेकिन हम पूरी तरह से आश्वस्त हैं कि भाजपा का कार्यकर्ता अपने संघर्ष और परिश्रम के बल पर इन 5 राज्यों में सशक्त भाजपा का नेतृत्व प्रदान करने जाएगा।
After the grand event, the Prime Minister accompanied Nabin as he took charge at his office. Nabin's family was present to witness his elevation as party president. The Prime Minister was seen sharing candid moments with Nabin's family. Nabin's rise to the top of the party symbolizes a generational shift within the BJP. It also shows the party in a different light compared with its rivals, especially the Congress, where one dynasty and its trusted old guard still hold the reins. As Nitin Nabin takes control of the party, he will be shouldering enormous burden. Nabin will have to balance ties between the party and the RSS. With his term coming right after successful tenures of Amit Shah and JP Nadda, it is evident Nitin Nabin has big shoes to fill. With Aishwarya Paliwal, Himanshu Mishra, Piyush Mishra, Bureau Report, India Today.